How are you doing, Internet? I'm B-Nuts, and today I'd like to talk to you about something that's absolutely integral and essential to life and everything else in Equestria. Magic. Magic is so integral that the weather doesn't operate on its own apart from within the Everfree forest. And with plants, if they have fruit, it may wither and die while on its trees or branches. God forbid Celestia should sleep in, and if Luna should be in a mood with the moon, the tides will tell her temper. Generally speaking, it is difficult to tell exactly what role magic plays within the societies in and around Equestria, in a world which I like to call Torel, comes from Lauren Faust. But in its absence, when Tyrek steals everybody's magic, we can tell that it has a great deal to do with their strength and their durability and endurance. But this should especially be the case with the earth ponies, for whom that can be a defining trait. Not always though, as not all earth ponies are farmers or industrial workers. A lot of them are politicians or business ponies. But that could also have something to do with their tribal trait in magic, as I will get into shortly. However, it is clear that equestrian magic relies a lot upon one's emotional state. As Starlight tells Trixie, you have to imagine success. Picture what you want to do and it will happen. This leads into a kind of image of confidence and of strength, where what you're feeling can impact the result of what you can do. Whether or not a Pegasus can fly at all, even regardless of whether or not they can fly quickly, whether or not a unicorn can cast well, whether or not an earth pony can even harvest a fruit. All that can be tied back into emotion, and I'll get back into that a little bit more later. Zecora and the zebras are also an interesting possible outlier. Zecora uses potions, catalysts, in order to make the changes that she wants to, the effects that she wants. But she can also teach others to do the same, such as Twilight or Apple Bloom. So that's not necessarily unique to zebras. And Discord, well, he basically is magic. He hasn't really been defined within the show or the comics, and he's called himself a spirit, and he is capable of all sorts of things, including removing unicorns' horns and Pegasi wings, which should be extremely difficult to accomplish otherwise, but he can, basically because he is magic. But I like to imagine that he is part of a pan-dimensional Q continuum, and therefore is himself a Q. Other than Zecora and Discord, other magical beings within Equestria can have magic that fall either within passive or active categories. For passive categories, they're almost always on. Active are the ones that you have to supply an effort for in order for it to activate. Therefore, because an earth pony's magic is almost constantly on, other than when it's been stolen by Tyrek, I count that as being passive magic. And what are an earth pony's magic? I count them as durability, increased endurance, and strength. But those can come from something else, because not all earth ponies are farmers or industrial workers, like I said, so they don't necessarily need that kind of endurance or strength. What I believe is central to earth pony magic is their connection to the earth. This can give non-workers insights that they can use within their fields. So for example, the mayor may need these insights in order to work with other ponies and make Ponyville function. And this can be true as well for other politicians as well as the business ponies. Notice that Filthy Rich, despite being maybe a little bit of a sleaze, we don't really know, he does good business with Granny Smith, and Granny Smith more than allowing this, she seems to enjoy their little partnership. So obviously them being able to work well together, partly because of the rapport that they have, and it's also because of that connection to the earth that tells them that they can trust each other and rely upon each other for business. This also can explain things like Pinky's sense. Even though Pinkie Pie is one of the more outlandish and cartoonish of the characters within the series, she gets these insights, and they're usually very specific about what kinds of dangers they can be, much more specific at times than Spider Sense, the original that it derived from. And similar with Cheesy Sense and the other variations that the Pie family seems to have. So what we can get from that is that the connection to the earth that earth ponies possess can manifest in all different ways. And this comes across in some as the ability to plant and make things grow at an accelerated rate, or it can register as a sixth sense. I did tend to think of Applejack's growing as being magically inspired, even before it was confirmed by Tyrek being able to drain earth ponies of their magic. I think it first surfaced as something that you could trace in the Hearth-Swarming Eve episode, but I always thought that was more allegory for the kinds of things that earth ponies could do than for something that you could trace as any real feat. That was until Castle Sweet Castle, when she made plants sprout and grow very quickly in a very short amount of time, during the song of course, on flagstone. So that was clearly magic inspired as well. If you take another look back and take a look at the way Sweet Apple Acres has been able to operate, it has multiple crops and multiple times for harvesting all of them. And I do not think that in reality you could make things grow to be able to harvest them that quickly, that often. You would tire out the land, you would exhaust it of everything that it needs and the nutrients in order to grow the plants. But Applejack and the others have no problem with that. They also have strength beyond what you would think they would have given their physical appearances. And especially this would be the case for Applejack, since she appears to be much more slight than Big Macintosh, and yet she's been shown to be stronger than him in some cases. And yet there's also the case that under the influence of the love poison, Big Mac was able to hop and drag an entire house from its foundations. Now, most people, I believe, almost all people, discount that as a feat for him because it was under the influence. But I think we can count that as at least a feat for the full potential of an earth pony, because the love poison may have unlocked that potential which he always had. Therefore, it's something that you can expect earth ponies could do if they really had to try. And if you think that harvesting apples from a tree could be as simple as a swift buck to the trunk, as Applejack and the others have done numerous times, then you must be kidding yourself. That has to be part magic too. I mean, a little tap to the trunk and it all falls down in a pattern for 3 little baskets that are all around the trunk. That's not something that you could do without magic. So with that, it's a lot more ironic when they say they're trying to do a winter wrap-up without magic, and the entire thing is based around the magic that they're using, because it's part of the way that they live in Equestria. Everything that they do, even when they're trying not to do it with magic, is with magic. Of course, increased durability isn't something that earth ponies alone have. almost all of the other ponies and other creatures within this cartoon, this animated series, have it too in some extent. Pinky more than most, but because they have at least slight tune forcing, they can endure hits that would have otherwise lamed or broken them. They're horses after all, so that's something that they would have had to be concerned about if they didn't have that kind of magical protection. Now we come to Pegasi, and in some ways they're the easiest to define. But some of the things that they do could be defined as having passive magic, others active. What are we talking about here? Two things. You have weather manipulation and you have flight. Yes, flight is something that counts as being part of their racial magic, because when Tyrek took it away from them, none of the Pegasi could fly. But as well, it's because if you try to fly with such small wings and with a body solid enough to take being bowled aside by a dragon, that wouldn't work. Obviously, a Pegasus doesn't have hollow bones like a bird. They can take hits, they can keep going. Rainbow Dash rarely ever gets seriously injured. So that's it. And when you take a look at a lot of the Pegasi, their wings are too small to be able to provide the lift that they would need to fly at all. Never mind flying fast, which a lot of them do. Which means that their flight, by that virtue, is magical. And there's even further proof, the Sonic Rainboom. You may have believed that this is purely a feat of speed, but I have believed for a while that it is a feat of magic as well. When Rainbow Dash breaks that barrier and goes supersonic, what I believe she's been always doing is also breaking the magic barrier. So she is going beyond and breaking the sonic magic barrier when she does her Sonic Rainboom. If you need further proof, she can sometimes do it going upwards, as she did in A Canterlot Wedding, and even Twilight was able to do it, even though she's not a particularly fast or skilled flyer. And when she went off to do it, when she took off, her horn was glowing, meaning that she was casting magic to be able to do so. Now think about what this means for individual Pegasi. You have Snowflake, or Bulk Biceps, who has these little tiny wings, and yet he's a good enough flyer to be within the Wonderbolt's reserve. You have a lot of these little fillies at the end of the pilot with little tiny wings, smaller even than Scootaloo's, and they're able to fly enough to put wreaths around Luna's neck. So obviously they have the magic to do it. So what does this mean for Scootaloo herself? Most likely, it means that her being unable to fly is almost entirely a matter of confidence in self-image. She doesn't think that she can fly because she thinks her wings need to be larger, that they need to grow in, because of the examples of others that she is focusing upon. So if she was able to become more confident in herself as a flyer and not just as someone who scoots really fast, then she would be able to fly without a problem. She might even be able to match Rainbow Dash eventually. And really, given what happened in Parental Guidance, it looks like she just might accomplish this, and pretty soon. I mean, she has the support now of Dash's parents and Rainbow Dash herself. So I think that Scootaloo's future as a flyer is going to look pretty bright. Then we have weather manipulation. This is not only the ability to move things around within the sky to where they're supposed to be, but also to make them act in the way they're supposed to, making rain clouds rain or thunder, and doing anything else that needs to be done weather-wise. And as I said at the beginning, none of this happens without the Pegasi doing it in the first place. And goes all the way back to Earth swarming, the tale that they have there, that this is part of what the Pegasi did in order to contribute to the 3 different tribes. They managed weather, made it more favorable for the Earth ponies to grow things, so that the Earth ponies could supply the food to both the unicorns and the Pegasi as well. The Pegasi also have these weather machines in the factory, so they also have technical know-how to a pretty great degree, considering that when the series started, the technology level for most of what we saw was around the industrial or pre-industrial age, but it's all over the place because you have places that look more modern, like Manhattan. You know, it's basically in New York. It seems to have electricity or it's powered by magic. And it's the presence of magic that allows for the level of technology to be all over the place. We have seen almost every Pegasus fly. We haven't seen every Pegasus use their weather manipulation magic. For example, Fluttershy. I don't think we have ever really seen her do it, at least not on her own. In Hurricane Fluttershy, she was contributing by using her speed to make the water mill spin faster. And she was only contributing a small fraction in comparison to the other Pegasi. But she was still contributing quite a bit, and she was able to go much faster than usual because she really wanted to. But we have never seen her on her own move a cloud. So that's something that may be interesting to see whether or not she can do it, or whether or not her weather manipulation magic has been compromised in favor of her taming magic and the stare. Now, the main reason why Pegasus magic is hard to categorize is because you never know when it's on or off. I think that their flight magic can be switched on or off as they apply effort towards it. However, with weather manipulation, it's trickier because they have to be able to stay on the clouds when they're up in the airborne cities like Cloudsdale or at Wonderbolt's Academy, otherwise they would fall through unless they're staying on the tarmac as Spike demonstrated. When you're sleeping on a cloud, you can't really put an effort into what you're doing. So if, like Rainbow Dash, they sleep within a cloud house or cloud castle, then being able to sleep without falling through would indicate a passive type of magic, in my opinion. And then by putting more effort into it, they can kind of switch it on even more, make it more powerful, which may explain how Dash was able to compress the cloud to the point where when her friends were falling on it, it could spring them back up onto Wonderbolt's Academy. Finally, we come to unicorn magic, and this is the most overt type, and it's obviously active since it takes an effort in order to cast a spell. Now, for some of them, you may think that they don't require anything like an incantation, at least not allowed, but they do require effort and the willpower in order to bring them off each and every single time. But what makes unicorns far different from traditional human casters is the fact that so much of it can be taken place in their heads. Not only are their casting media their horns attached to their heads, unless Discord says otherwise, the incantations, the catalysts, almost all of it can be mental. And then it translates into mental effort, and just like that, you have a spell cast. We do have confirmation that incantations are part of the process, though. We have it with Star Swirl's journal and the spell that he was working at the end that Twilight completed. You have it with the second or third version of Starlight Glimmer, in that when she's trying to think of what spells to use, she often says their names out loud or says part of the incantations. So those are still parts of the requirements for casting, even though we don't normally hear or see them. While unicorn magic is the most overt and visible type, it can also be the most restrictive type. It's the one that made me think that all ponies have a certain number of, let's say, skill slots, spell slots, within the parlance of a role-playing game or even Dungeons and Dragons. So each unicorn, at least according to what we heard in Ghostbusters from Spike, that each one can only perform a certain number of spells. And you take that and you consider not only the general ones, the ones almost every unicorn can do, like telekinesis and illumination, but also the ones that are related to the unicorn's special talent, their cutie mark magic. And we know that cutie mark magic is a huge part of what they do because of everything that happened in seasons 4 and 5, that there was so much emphasis on it, and especially after T-Rex stole them, the cutie marks vanished. And when Starlight took them away and replaced them with the equal suppression mark, then not only were they unable to do the things that they were known for, such as dash flying around quickly, but their personalities became suppressed as well. So Pinkie lost her energy, and eventually they would have likely fallen into the same pace as the rest of the villagers in our town. If what Spike said is true, and Twilight didn't counter him, then what that means is that each unicorn only has a certain number of spells that they can learn and use throughout their lives. And the impression that I got is that this doesn't change, or at least it does not change radically. It would take an excessive amount of effort to learn beyond the normal means. And while Starlight Glimmer can be said to be studious, after her reformation, we have no proof of that prior. If a unicorn has only 5 spell slots, what can they do? Usually telekinesis, levitation, illumination, and maybe 2 or 3 other things, including their directly cutie mark magic. So if we take Rarity's example, and we say that her talent is bringing out the inner beauty of objects and beings, then we can say that her gem finding spell is part of her talent, as is the sort of cloth fusion that she sometimes uses in order to her dresses and her other fabrications. But then there's the illusion spell that she used in Suited for Success as well, and it's powerful enough that I believe it was hoity-toity, he was able to smell things within the illusion, and I believe that this powerful spell is also part of Rarity's talent. What I do not believe that she could do, even though she was shown to do it once within the comic, was teleportation, and I believe that this is a higher level spell, particularly self-teleportation. We have only really seen Alicorns do. Nightmare Moon demonstrated it, and then Twilight learned it from her, and we know that Celesta used it in Lesson 0. We don't know whether Cadence has used it, I believe. Flurry Heart has flown around and used all sorts of spells, but I think she's an outlier. But I also believe that she should lose most of her power and have to regain it back as part of a character arc. And the point is that these more difficult spells are ones which not every unicorn should be able to cast, and that each one should have those fine limits. While those limits would make Twilight Sparkle more special, I still also believe that she follows them in a way. I believe her talent is the ability to learn and master any spell that she hears or sees or reads about. So that's still only one thing, which means that her magic would still follow the example set by everything else, even as she fulfills the purpose within her cutie mark. It's a little bit clever, don't you think? That the spirits responsible for the cutie marks, or whatever they are, whatever decides who gets what cutie mark, they set that sort of thing up. But on the other hand, there's Starlight, whose talents seem to be cutie mark magic. Taking it from one pony, maybe putting it on another, but we have seen her contain it. So we don't really know what exactly that was, unless the showrunners tell or show us what it was. But it does seem strange that the spirits would give her that, especially after she blamed cutie marks and cutie mark magic for taking away her friend. It's kind of weird, but at the same time, there's this inkling that it should have led to big revelation about the nature of cutie marks. The last type of tribal magic that I would like to cover is Alicorn magic, because this is a combination of all three basic tribal magics. And I believe this because when Celestia and Luna became stewards of Equestria, and they were chosen as representatives, they were chosen to represent all three tribes because no one pony from either of them, from any of them, could agree on something like that, on what to do. They kept on fighting, they probably had wars outside of what was shown in the pageant, and that would have simply created more chaos than there already was, and there was plenty of chaos. What I believe is that Alicorns possess traits and magics of all three tribes: the Earth Ponies, the Unicorns, and the Pegasus. We haven't seen all that much of their Earth Pony magic, although Celestia and Luna do often act more grounded than the average pony, and that may be part of the reason why so many fans think that Celestia seems so aloof. She has all this wisdom from thousands of years of living and ruling, but she's also deeply connected to the land and her subjects through her Earth Pony magic, because she doesn't grow anything, but she does nurture them as a sort of mother figure. And Luna has to be at least somewhat grounded in order to police people's dreams and ponies' dreams. The Journal of the Two Sisters reveals that she's the tamer between the two. So, sort of like Fluttershy, she also has the tendency to care for creatures. But at the same time, she's also the more adventurous of the two. So, a little bit of Earth Pony magic, which we haven't really seen, but we can speculate about. Pegasus magic, that's easy. They fly, and they manipulate the sun and the moon. That's big time weather. That's something that it used to take entire groups of unicorns to do, and according to the journal, it would exhaust them completely, and they wouldn't regenerate the magic either, so it's similar to having been drained by Tyrek. And unicorn magic, of course, is simple, since the sisters have often casted spells, and they're often more powerful than average unicorn spells. And the thing that I believe makes Alicorns more powerful than unicorns ever could be is the resonance between the three different types of magic. They're working together and constantly resonating together, making each other more powerful in this loop, so that the output of an Alicorn's magic becomes far greater than any one part. Maybe they can activate one type of magic separately from the others, and if they activate two together, then it's kind of like a 2 times boost. But if they activate all 3 together, it's a 3 times boost, something like that. So the idea is that by making these things work together, they themselves become more powerful than their Earth, Unicorn, or Pegasus counterparts. It's in this power as well that the Alicorns can set themselves apart from other ponies, and yet, of course, they also have their limits. Each time they get exhausted, whether you're talking about Alicorns or Unicorns, they demonstrate that they have a limited mana pool, limited container for the mana, the stuff of magic, but as well they have limited mana, the stuff that makes magic work within that. So they all have that limit, whether they're Alicorns, Unicorns, Pegasi, or Earth Ponies. Earth Ponies burn through their mana so slowly that they rarely ever end up exhausted. Whereas Unicorns, when they casting their spells all the time, they can end up completely exhausted and it matters afterwards. But the only way to tell really is by looking at the auras from their horns, which not every pony can actually see. Spike might be able to, and some other ponies, but most of them can't. We see them because it's part of the show and it helps us to identify who's casting the spell. But most ponies can't see a magical aura to tell who's casting, otherwise that would make mysteries a little less mysterious. In any case, that sets up some of the basics of how things work around equestrian life and how it is for these different types of ponies. And I think it's interesting to note the different limits and abilities that, even though they don't often seem to be equal, because Alicorn's master race or whatever, they do all have their part to play within the equestrian society and ecology, and they help the entire world work, because without all of them working together, it would quickly and easily break down. So unfortunately, that's how much magic is in the world, and how much that world relies upon the magic. So hopefully, if FiM was to evolve away from magic somewhat, they would also be able to do so in a way that the world would be able to adapt to it. Because otherwise, it would mean the end of Equestria, not only as we know it, but also because of how the magic sustains all life, all vegetation, all of the critters within it. That about wraps up this analysis video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, like, subscribe below to show your support, and let me know if you'd like to see me analyze specific subjects or characters, and I'll get back to that. I do have one planned for Starlight Glimmer, and we'll analyze her character and how it's changed, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!